talk about Yu-Gi-Oh anime archetypes that deserve to be put in the real-life card game all the time on this channel, and it feels inevitable that they'll all make it in eventually, just give it a few years, or decades. But we never really focus on individual cards that aren't a part of an anime archetype. There are plenty of one-off cards that were just around in the anime and manga for specific scenes, and they have busted effects that are meant to be a single episode conundrum where no one considered the repercussions of those cards ever returned, or maybe the effect just doesn't make sense outside of that duel, and as such, Konami never felt the need to print them, and fans may have not been asking. So for this video, we want to go over those random cards from the anime and manga that would be impossible to print with their original effects, or maybe we're overreacting and they would be fine cards. Either way, they seem too powerful to print or wouldn't work with the proper game mechanics. And joining me is my co-host who scours the fictional world for the worst cards, Sam from DungeonDiveBar.
My printing was in 1992. I've never been retrained.
Now, let's behold the top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh anime and manga cards that can never be printed. Number 10, Monster Register. There was a one-off duelist in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX who just went by X or Howard X Miller, and as his name pun implies, he was just a straight-up mill deck. As in, all of his cards revolve around forcing you to send cards from your hand or deck to the graveyard until you can't draw and automatically lose. But since old milling decks were slow, the anime sped it up a bit with a whole bunch of new cards for his deck to make those cards fly into the graveyard faster. Cards that make it easy to mill already have to be carefully balanced, so ones that just haphazardly force milling are very risky to put into the game, so much so that he deserved a couple of cards on this list. But let's start with his main card, Monster Register. It's a continuous trap, where every time a monster is summoned by either player, the controller of that monster must send cards from the top of their deck to the graveyard equal to that monster's level. Obviously, having that unlimited times per turn is crazy. Even just one summon could be a mill of 4 cards, and you have to do nothing to earn it besides have this card up. Considering higher levels on boss monsters are common, it feels like you could lose half to all of your deck in a single board setup in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! In the anime, it was a bit more tame with Jaden just summoning a single level 4 monster in passing, or going with just one fusion monster for a turn to give him a shot at keeping his deck.
Synchron players are in shambles right now. Centurion players are losing on turn 3. And also, the fact that it says summoned monster means if you Nibiru somebody, they have to mill 11 cards too. So they could go through their whole combo being like, yes, okay, I have a few cards left in my deck, I have my board for game, I got a rock dropped on me, and I have to mill 11 cards. And it's in defense mode, so I can't attack with it.
If it was printed, I would assume there would be a once per turn restriction where you would either have to go with the first monster summoned, or you could choose one monster per turn to wait for your payoff. And it would be slightly less effective in some cases in the modern game, since we now have Link and Xyz monsters who are not classified by level. We also live in a time when cards have loads of graveyard effects, so you could be setting off a time bomb by allowing yourself or the opponent to put up to 12 cards in the graveyard. Cards like the Zombie Vampire or Kashtira Riseheart that forced a mill of 3 to 4 cards from your opponent were considered fair, and don't get me started on how much runic decks can mill in a turn, so with enough limitations, Monster Register could be a tool for milling decks that's on par with the modern meta, but for now, it's just a bit too mill crazy. Number 9, Cursed Twin Dolls. This one could feasibly be printed, but there's one line of text we wanted to point out. When you activate it, your opponent randomly selects one effect and you get the other. Effect 1 is, each time a card is sent to either player's graveyard, you gain 200 life points for each card. Effect 2 is, your graveyard disappears. Cards can no longer be sent to your graveyard. I just love the sentence, your graveyard disappears. Now realistically, it just means banishing any cards that would have gone to your graveyard, or removing from play as it was known at the time. You know, like a one-sided macrocosmos. You just can't print a line of text about disappearing graveyards. Bakura used this card in his duel against Yugi during the Millennium World arc, with the goal that Bakura had cards that relied on having an empty graveyard, more on that in a later entry, so it seemed like he was getting the bad effect of the two, but really, it was for a reversal later on.
I want to see, I want to see what its manga effect states. In the manga, the player each picked one of 2 boxes, red and black. The red box gives life to the player, the black box casts a curse on the entire field. Its description of the black box is even worse. Your graveyard disappears. Cards can no longer be sent to your graveyard. Each card that was in your graveyard becomes a ghost on your side of the field. These ghosts cannot attack or be attacked, they do not occupy any zones, they cannot be used to pay any costs, and they do not prevent your opponent from attacking you directly. If one of your cards is destroyed, it becomes another ghost on your side of the field. How do you do it? Just how do you do it? You can't. And it doesn't even count as banishing it, so you can't even be like, ah yes, I send from my deck to the graveyard DD Scout Plane, and now it summons itself. Your graveyard just simply does not.
The vibe I always got from this card was the banish pile was not meant to be accessible in any way, and technically you can do that by banishing the cards face down instead, since that means the cards cannot be checked by effects that recover banished cards, but even face down banishing still has a few cards nowadays that can recover any banished card. I want the effect to be like Igami's skill in Duel Links, where it literally deletes your banish pile from existence. See those banished cards? Rips them up. Nope, they're gone. And once again, this is what removing from play used to be like until more cards let you use that banish pile, so I guess what I'm really asking is for this card to create another banish pile that's even more banished. If this card is ever printed, I'd assume the random effect choice would be on a coin flip, the graveyard disappearing would just be banishing, and the number of decks it's used in would be minimal. Number 8. Rumbling of Heaven and Earth. We've got a manga exclusive card to the 5Ds manga here. This was used in the duel between Jack and Callan, with the effect of, effects that target the field will target the graveyard. Effects that target the graveyard will target the field. What? It sounds like it's just trying to be contrarian for the fun of it, and the terms target the field and target the graveyard are so weird. So like blanket effects for field destruction just go to the graveyard now? Doesn't that just fizzle them? Like if you zap the field with Raigeki but it gets redirected to the graveyard, aren't you just needlessly zapping the corpses? And for targeting the graveyard, I don't even know where to begin. I guess if an effect banishes or returns cards to the hand from the field or graveyard, that's pretty easy to swap, but otherwise, I don't even know what you do with this card. We see what they meant by this effect in one form in the context of the manga duel. Jack uses his jeweled Red Dragon Archfiend's effect to wipe the field, but Callan counters with his Infernity Bishop in the graveyard, which can prevent one of his monsters from being destroyed when it's there. But Jack reverse counters by chaining Rumbling, so now he destroys everything in Callan's graveyard instead, and he chars everything that was just sitting in the graveyard. It looks cool, but like, is that really doing anything? However, the game still counts it as destroying via effect, so Jack equips his spell Champion's Majesty, which gives the dragon 500 attack points for each monster it destroys by an effect, and that's 7 in the graveyard, so his attack goes up to 6,500 and Jack attacks for game. Also, the spell negates all graveyard effects, so I guess the field is also negated now too thanks to Rumbling. But in the end, Jack was just destroying what's already been destroyed and gets bonus points that count as destruction. Is that really fair?
Also, during this duel, somehow Callan got down to 0 life points and regained life points, so like, this duel had a lot of hokum in it, because he had a card. When you have no cards in your hand or field and your life points hit 0, activate this card in the graveyard, 0 Gate of the Void. Special summon Void Ogre Dragon. When this monster is destroyed, you lose the game. All other defeats are negated. We finally have it. A card that can prevent victory by Exodia. Now, this card on loan could have made this list. However, the cards surrounding this duel are even more deranged than it, leading us to talk about the Rumbling of Heaven and Earth. I love the idea visually. I activate Monster Reborn, targeting the Dark Magician on my field to special summon it to the graveyard. That's how this card works. It flips graveyard and field. So Monster Reborn would summon a monster to the graveyard. Call of the Haunted would summon from the field to the graveyard. Raigeki would summon from the graveyard to the field. Or we don't even know where they go. It doesn't say. They don't get banished. They don't go to the field. Because if it flips everything, then yeah, cards sent to the graveyard should go to the field. And cards on the field should go straight to the graveyard. Could you imagine normal summoning Tearlament Merle and her effect activating? That's basically what this card says. And because of that, I think this card should be banned forever and forgotten in the annals of history.
One other note though is after destroying the graveyard, Jack does have a line where he says, "Now all Infernity monsters in the graveyard have been excluded from play." So I guess destroying in this case is also banishing, but he also gets credit for destroying. I think he just wants to have his cake and eat it too. Is it destroying or banishing? If they ever want to print this card and make it truly manga accurate, we'll just need a lot of clarification. Number 7, Ivy Bind Castle. This card was only used in one duel and it was destroyed destroyed almost immediately, but I think that's because it has such a restrictive effect, it couldn't be on the field for long for the sake of plot. It was used in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 in the duel between the father of Yugioh, the protagonist, and Yuri, one of the antagonists. It's a continuous spell from Yuri's deck, whose effect is negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent controls. Also, monsters your opponent controls cannot attack. Once per turn during your opponent's standby phase, inflict 800 damage to your opponent for each monster they control. It also has a maintenance cost where you can choose to tribute a Predaplant monster during your standby phase, or else destroy the card, with Predaplant being Yuri's archetype, but this card didn't last on the field long enough to see that take place. As you can probably tell, this card is a strong floodgate and then some. It's a one-sided skill drain that also affects face-up spells and traps, which is technically every spell and trap, since when you activate them on the field, they have to be face-up. So basically, this card says your opponent can do nothing except graveyard effects and hand traps that don't need to hit the field. And on top of stopping your opponent, it also inflicts 800 burn damage per opponent's monster, so it puts a timer on them since it's either get burned by having monsters, or leave yourself open for attacks.
That one line may be the most broken card to have ever been made in any context in Yu-Gi-Oh! There are 0 cards that can be played that won't be negated. And even then, I say that, tier limit can still bypass that. Which just goes to show how powerful modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is when there is a deck that can bypass negate all face-up card effects. Because even through that, they can still go into Kaleido Heart or Kit Kalos, which is crazy. But the fact that it's just all face-up cards, it's just insane. I can't wait to counter this card with Beast King Barbaros.
And even with that, it can't attack.
It is a Jinzo permanent swords mixed with spell canceller, mixed with skill drain. Sure, you could discard cards from your hand in these graveyard effects, but like, you still can't attack.
Now, if it was a continuous trap, then you could counter with Trap Eater to get rid of it.
Yeah, you need Spell Eater, which doesn't exist. Unless... No, it doesn't.
The only reason I think this card was as busted as it was in the anime is because it was a plot device to show Yuri's potential power. Yuya's dad had some cards on his field, then on Yuri's turn, Yuri activates some other spell to bait out the dad's spell negates, and then afterwards, he could activate Ivy Bind Castle freely to threaten a full board negate. But as soon as it was the dad's turn again, and after suffering the burn damage, he had some monsters with hand effects that ultimately let him destroy a spell, and the castle was no more. It very much was a, phew, that was a scary couple of minutes moment. I guess this card could be as broken as it wanted to be for a scripted duel if the solution was right around the corner. It's funny just how unprintable they made this effect. Even if you don't run any Predaplants, it doesn't need the tribute after the one standby phase, since if you activate it on your main phase, it would then be active on your turn and for your opponent's turn, which is long enough to completely screw them over. At least put this effect on a trap to give it a little bit of setup precaution, and make it where you have to tribute a Predaplant to activate it so it's limited to certain decks. If it was printed, they'd probably soften the floodgate and make it only accessible when Predaplants are on the field to make it not generic, but for now, it's just that broken card that could have been more broken if the anime writers let it be. Number 6, the quiz panels. We gave the game show deck a full breakdown on our anime archetypes that still don't exist list, but for this topic especially, we need to highlight the quiz panels again. The game show archetype was used by the one-off opponent from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Bob Banter. Once it gets out the big Quizzer panel monster and uses some other specific support, you get to set monsters that act as the panels that give you the challenges of the game show. Their flip effects can ask trivia questions, make you perform physical challenges, or give you a requirement to fulfill based on cards in the deck. If the opponent succeeds, you take 500 damage, but if they fail, they take 500 damage and their monster that attacked into the panel is destroyed. The issue is, there's never been a precedent for cards that ask for trivia or physical challenges, so like, how do those get judged? For the trivia, there is a set answer, like asking what cards are needed to activate Huge Revolution, or naming cards with alternate win conditions, but what if the answer changes as new cards come out? What if we get new alternate win conditions? If you say it, it won't be on the card's answer, it would have to be updated immediately. And even so, I feel like if you see this deck once, you'll know all the answers and the game is less fun. It's not like they're going to have randomized questions each time. There's only 9 panels total, 3 for each Egyptian god, and not all of them are trivia, so it's pretty easy to memorize. And for the quiz panels that give you physical challenges, that seems like a ruling's nightmare. One is do 20 push-ups within a set time limit. Can they say you didn't go low enough for a push-up to be counted? Who's timing this? And my favorite is hold your breath in a bowl of water for a minute. When we discussed this on the other video, one person commented that we could have some jackass who goes to tournaments with a bowl of water splashing everywhere and is like, no, trust me, I need it for my deck. For the last type of panel effect, it's a question based on the duel and decks being used, like how many turns have passed since the duel started, the total levels of monsters in the graveyard, or forcing the opponent to draw a card and it has to have 50 or less letters on it. These can at least be measured in a finite number, and will vary from duel to duel, so you could make this archetype just have challenges like that, but the whole gimmick of it just seems way too much of a hassle to print in the first place.
I said a lot in our last video about these cards, but also some of them just don't really work in modern card. Like, can you imagine a player being asked to name all 3 cards needed for Huge Revolution? A card that has been out of print, by the way, since 2005? There are people who are 20 years old this year that could have never seen Huge Revolution. Could you name something that happened the year before you were born or the year you were born? Could you name like the 3 most popular baseball cards?
Yeah, you got a good point there. I don't know, Jose Canseco?
My point stands. Before we get distracted and turn this Yu-Gi-Oh video into a baseball video, you can't make your opponent do physical challenges, especially this card. Your opponent draws the cards and reveal it. The card text must be less than 50 letters? Sure, let me just draw Endymion, the mighty master of magic. I think I just lose at that point.
I think there's 50 letters in every once per turn clause alone nowadays.
Especially Quizzer panel slide for 30. Hold your breath for 1 minute. With the new time rules, a minute is a long time to lose waiting for an effect to resolve. That's absurd. 45 minutes, so 15 per duel. That's an entire minute out of 15. Regardless of how long a turn takes, like, you lose a full minute. I think they're fun. They're definitely cards that are for a playground game, but they would be hard banned for a tournament. They would be forbidden so fast.
Really, the physical challenges are the only thing that seem legitimately impossible to set up within reason, but the whole archetype just seems like it would be more fun as a side mode in a video game rather than something for the actual card game. And they have trivia in the video games, so why not theme that after Bob banter? Number 5, Captain Lock. Captain Lock was a fusion pirate monster used by the one-off pirate opponent in Arc 5. This monster was the guy's only gimmick since it was an insane floodgate. His effect is, neither player can summon or set monsters from the hand, and if a monster with 1000 or more attack is on the field, destroy him. Forget any downsides though. This guy prevents you from summoning from the hand, the most basic way to start a play, and you can't even set a monster to flip it the next turn. No, you cannot restrict one of the most basic elements of Yu-Gi-Oh! They've tried that with special summoning many times and those cards tend to get banned. While there are plenty of cards that can special summon from the deck to avoid Captain Lock, obviously it's unfair if that's the only way you can start a combo. In the anime duel, it was a 2 versus 1, where the pirate summons Captain Lock on the first turn. Yuya can't summon anything on his turn since his deck is pendulum summon based, meaning it all comes from the hand first, and when Yuya's ally Sora joins in, the workaround is solved where Sora fusion summons to bypass Captain Lock, and then the pirate has nothing strong left for an easy defeat. Captain Lock did have a few minor restrictions, being that he had 0 attack and defense, making it easy to roll over him, which you might have not even had to do since he's auto-destroyed when a monster with 1000 or more attack is on the field. And that's both sides, so you have to be careful if you play any monsters with him too. Even with his revival trap, Captain Lock was made of glass against any monster, so he was fine once you got past the floodgate. But the most notable restriction for Captain Lock was he needed Skull Mariner and Skull Knight number 2 specifically to be fused. One's a level 4 normal water monster with 1600 attack, the other's a fiend monster that summons other copies of himself when he's used as a tribute summon for a fiend monster. These are 2 things that don't have synergy in the same deck, and we don't have effects to get this specific combo of monsters in your hand consistently without specific support, especially in 2016 when this episode came out. The only reason it worked is because it was a scripted anime duel where the pirate had both monsters and polymerization in his opening hand, so in real life, it would be a total crapshoot if you draw the right combo to get those 2 monsters and something to fuse them with.
I love this card because it is so spectacularly terrible in the context in which it exists. Neither player can summon or set from the hand. That's amazing. That's really powerful. And it's made with pack filler from GX. Even funnier. However, this card exists solely in the fusion dimension of Arc 5, which means every single person he'd be dueling can fusion summon, completely bypassing its floodgate. It's a card that solely exists to go and raid other dimensions who can't do that. And the fact that there is a guy who does not leave the fusion dimension, by the way, they encounter him in the fusion dimension, who uses this card, and the only reason he's able to be successful during that duel is because he uses Yugioh's action cards to give Captain Locke attack points.
Side note too, you said GX era for its materials, but Skull Mariner actually came out in Pharaoh's Servant.
Oh my god, it was Pharaoh's Servant. This was DM era pack filler. Oh, even better. Yeah, no, this card is only good outside of anywhere it's playable in the context of their universe.
If Captain Locke was printed, they would probably do what they do with every other modern fusion and just give it broader requirements based on the original materials, like a fiend and a water monster, or maybe a normal monster. That being said, I don't see this guy getting printed unless you really loosen that floodgate, and if they did, would it truly be Captain Locke? Number 4, Purse with a Hole, another one from Howard X. Miller's deck. Perforated Wallet, or Purse with a Hole in the dub, feels like one of those traps that you hope to draw turn 1 and then immediately activate it on your opponent's turn. It reads, activate only while your opponent has 6 or more cards in their hand. Send random cards in their hand to the graveyard until they have 5 cards in their hand. For the rest of this turn, your opponent cannot play cards from their hand. The point of this card in the anime was Miller had other cards that forced Jaden to draw to further deplete his deck, and then make him discard when his hand was over the limit. And then after that, you couldn't retaliate immediately since you can't play cards from your hand after it resolves for the turn, which is an insane floodgate and the real reason this card can't be printed. In real life, I would expect this to be used as a trap dust shoot style card, where you hope to have it in your opening hand going first, so on turn 2, your opponent draws, making their hand 6 cards if they didn't use a hand trap already, and now you can immediately activate Purse, force a discard, and then you get the floodgate. The random discard isn't as bad as something like trap dust shoot, because it doesn't let you look at your opponent's hand and choose. The dust shoot effect also shuffles back into the deck rather than forcing a discard, potentially giving your opponent graveyard setup, so the first part of Purse's effect isn't that busted. But as mentioned, not being able to play a card from the hand for the turn is a completely unfair lockout. The only workarounds I can think of are hoping it discarded something with a good graveyard effect to start your engine now that you can't use your hand for the turn, or have a quick effect to chain to Purse's activation to reduce your hand size down to 5, thereby fizzling the effect.
Even if you chained a card to it, the condition is just activate only while your opponent has 6 or more cards. They can stop having 6 or more cards immediately after that. The activation condition was all that's required. And yeah, send random cards from their hand to the graveyard and hit send, so you can't even be like, ah ha ha, Dark World, ha ha ha. Nope, it's send, not this card. Even Hopper hates this card. Hopper! Stop yelling at Amazon.
That being said, this deck was full of BS milling where I don't think we have to worry about any of Miller's cards truly getting printed. Number 3, Living Arrow fused with Mammoth Graveyard. This one we're doing for fun since it doesn't quite meet the list criteria, but who doesn't love some Duelist Kingdom messiness? Most cards from Duelist Kingdom have been printed, but since they had effects that just kind of affected the field as we saw it with no game mechanics considered, those weirder cards from the manga got effects in real life that just tended to be bad. Like Anime Castle of Dark Illusions had an effect that said to shroud the field in darkness. Real life Castle was just a strange flip monster that supported zombies but only gave them a small boost every turn. One of these Duelist Kingdom cards that was drastically changed in real life was Living Arrow. Even though it's been printed, I initially didn't know it was, since they went with the direct Japanese translation of its name in English, Spell Shattering Arrow, with the effect of it destroys your opponent's face-up spells and then inflicts burn damage, which is a fine effect, but I'm including it here since the anime and manga effect is worded so weirdly. It has a few translations, but the one I've known is, the effect of your spell is given to an opponent's monster. What? I'm giving their monster an effect? What does that mean?
No, Mr. Top 10 List. Read it correctly. A spell effect affecting your army is inflicted onto an enemy monster.
How?
How indeed?
It makes sense once you see it in practice. It just means that it redirects a spell effect to one of your opponent's monsters. So if they use something like Tribute to the Doomed on your monster, nope, the arrow puts it on one of theirs. Simple. But there's an infamous scene where Yugi fused a living arrow with his mammoth graveyard, and then shot it into the Blue Eyes ultimate dragon, causing it to decay and lose attack equal to the attack of mammoth graveyard every turn.
Then Yugi took it to copy Pegasus's magic neutralizing force, which is a real card that Pegasus had, which is all magic loses effect on the field where this card is placed, to steal it and disable Toon World. You know that picture of Moon Knight where you're just like, random bullcrap, go? That's the living arrow in a nutshell. It's whatever Yugi wanted to do, it would do. And then, once Takahashi went, maybe I should make real rules for this game, the card vanished.
This here is one of those scenes that people remember for how wacky it was, and I think fans would get hype if Mammoth Graveyard Arrow was ever printed. Theoretically, in real life, the effect could just be a standard debuff, and it could equip to your opponent's monster like Parasite Paranoid and maybe change their type to zombie or dinosaur. But I want to see some sort of impossible to implement decaying mechanic where the Arrow Mammoth causes your opponent's monster to rot. This would likely just be a retrain of Mammoth Graveyard that seems inevitable someday since it was Yugi's card, and would have some sort of lockdown mechanic that just negates and stops a monster from attacking, so I expect to see it printed with an easier to explain effect, but still, it was one of those anime moments that broke my mind as a kid seeing it in motion, so I want to finally acknowledge my childhood dream of getting an impossible card that can melt a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon with its effect. Also, when you think about it, Great Mammoth of Goldfine got a retrain before Mammoth Graveyard. The one-off monster from a filler duel got a new form before a card from the protagonist deck, and that one-off monster was a palette swap of Mammoth Graveyard, whose art was literally taken of Mammoth Graveyard from the manga and painted gold. Kinda crazy how that happened. Number 2, Counterbalance, last milling card of the list, and it's related to the Bakura Yugi duel that used Cursed Twin Dolls. Later in that duel, Bakura uses the continuous spell Counterbalance, which reads, during each player's end phase, the turn player must send cards from the top of their deck to the graveyard equal to the total number of monsters on the field and monsters that are removed from play. First off, this confirms graveyard disappearing still means the monsters were visible as banished monsters, and second, that is an insane mill card. In the modern game, with the right effects, we're constantly banishing monsters or putting up floodgates that banish monsters, so once again, you could be setting off a mill that leads to like half the deck going at once, since it also counts monsters that were on the field.
I do also want to share its manga name for the English manga, All Killing Death card. That's it, it's just the All Killing Death card.
In the anime, this benefited from Bakura's disappearing graveyard strategy since he had no graveyard to send cards to thanks to Cursed Twin Dolls, so it meant just Yugi was affected and had an extra timer on his deck running low.
To the point that little Yugi had nothing to do and had to draw his last pathetic card. And while Bakura was laughing, Yugi went, hey, guess what? Gandora. And then Bakura went, oh my god, he has Gandora. Highly recommend you go watch the Bakura versus little Yugi duel. It is probably one of the best showings of anime nonsense.
And like we've been saying about the other mill cards, this showed up at a time when there were just less cards that got stuff back from the graveyard or had effects in there, so it was completely advantageous to do this to your opponent. Nowadays though, this card is busted either way, both for how much it could run out a deck in a mill strategy, or for how many graveyard effects it could set off. Rest in peace if you find out your opponent was playing Infernoids. If this card was printed today, well, I don't think there's a way you could restrict its effect while still keeping its flavor. You'd have to limit how many cards it mills, but like, the point is it mills a lot. You take away from its identity if you make it mill like 3 cards max. Yugi had to mill 11 cards just in the first turn he was affected by it, so in the end, this one might need a new effect entirely. For number 1, we'll go with the card that in canon was too powerful to exist. Could it exist in the game now? Maybe, but we know why it shouldn't, and we'll tell you too. Number 1, Judgment Arrows. To know why this is so powerful, you'll have to know Link Summoning. Now how do I explain Link Summoning quickly for those who are only classic fans? Well, to start, we have these monster zones for any extra deck monsters, where you can only use one at a time normally, so each player gets one. Link monsters can only be summoned here, or to another zone where a Link monster points to with the arrows around it, so you need to start with a Link monster that has at least one downwards arrow if you want to keep the Link party going. You need one monster for a Link 1, 2 for a Link 2, and so on, but you can use monsters with a Link rating above 1 to sub in extra monsters, and all this depends on the conditions to bring out Link monsters, since many can't just use any old monster. You'll need monsters with the right types, or archetype, or at the very least effect monsters. And if you manage to get an arrow to point upwards to the extra monster zone when you already occupy the other one, that's a rare time you get to Link summon to both of them, thereby blocking off your opponent from using it, and that's just not nice. However, they make it very hard to do that since no Link 2 monster has 2 arrows that diagonally point upwards, so you can't just get one diagonal down arrow from your first Link in the extra monster zone, and then double up the diagonal arrows to immediately point to the other zone and block off your opponent. No Link 3s or 4s do either without a negative side effect that likely clears your board. Link 6 though, then you're on easy street. You usually have to get like 5 Link monsters on your field to attempt this, not including all the materials you'll need for those Link monsters, so that's harder over just another strategy. With that all being said, you know what does make this easy? Judgment arrows, which has the effect that gives you 3 upwards Link arrows from the back row, which means instant Link summoning, and it gives you an easy route for that double extra monster zone Link, so bada bing, your opponent can't Link summon unless you give them an arrow from your side. Sure, it won't matter if your opponent doesn't play Link monsters as a strategy, but it's modern Yu-Gi-Oh! We all have Links, even if it's just a backup plan. The villains from Season 2 onwards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns specifically used this spell because it was broken and unfair, so characters pretty much had to do everything to stop or destroy it. It's not just that you block off the other extra monster zone, but all these Link monsters tend to have good effects, so you can't Link summon, and there's possibly negates or destruction that slap down your attempts to go after the arrows.
Yeah, and especially in speed duels in the anime, which is truncated down to 3 zones like Rush Duels is, you put that in your center zone, you have 4 slots to do extra deck plays in the anime.
And on top of it all, Judgment Arrows also doubles the attack of all monsters it points to, so now you have an extra thing to worry about.
Yeah, the attack doubling is even crazier, because, oh, yeah, I drop Firewall, Dragon, Dark Fluid, Neo Tempest, Terror. I don't remember what the big Link 5 is. You drop that. It starts at 3,000. You link it to the diagonal arrows. You put a monster in the grave, that fusion that you can banish for an Omni to get if you have a Link 4 or higher Link monster. And then it attacks 5,500. You declare an attack. It's got 11,000 now. And it can attack twice. And by the way Judgment Arrows is worded, that's not a once per turn doubling. So every time that monster attacks, it's double during damage calculation. And it's just crazy how powerful this card is, especially, again, 3 extra zones for extra deck monsters. Forget the fact that it's good for Link monsters. Who cares about that second effect? That's 3 more pendulum zones that you don't need a Link monster to summon to. It is incredibly powerful. If this card got printed, it would be banned, or would have to say you cannot pendulum summon a pendulum monster to a zone this card points to, and then nobody would play it.
So in the end, it's those bonus arrows that make Judgment Arrows such a crazy card with a simple concept, and that concept is scary enough to make it the top card we don't want to see printed. Now, what did you think? Were all these cards confusing at face value, or was there nothing to worry about even considering the original card's context? And what are some of your favorite anime-only cards that should stay anime-only, whether we discussed them or not? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next video.